when I started it, I wanted to be the best grid in the world. And there's two things I wanted to do. And, well, one thing. I wanted to stop people leaving your application, leaving your platform. And there's two ways that happens. One is the export to Excel. So your application has failed. It hasn't met the business requirement. And for that reason, the person has exported to bring the data into Excel to do a grouping or a pivot or something. The other problem was people going to BI tools, that the application would do a certain amount, but then, especially in finance, you'd have a set of BI reports that would work alongside the application, and people would go there. But the problem with Excel is you lose control. There'll be copies of the data around, and we don't like that. The problem with going to a BI tool is the developers lost control. You can't put functions into a BI report, but you can inside your platform. And to generate this grid that gave the Excel experience and gave a reporting experience and have that inside your application was the initial kind of vision of AG Grid. So you could say, well, that's kind of almost there now. And people have been asking me recently, Ned, you've created this cool grid that has all the features. Are you finished? What are you going to work on next? Well, I'm going to tell you one thing tonight. We're not finished. And we're going to keep marching on and do some really, really, really cool stuff. So the last talk is what's going to be the future. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stay the market leader. We are going to continue being the best grid that there is in the world. The JavaScript space moves, different frameworks come and go. We want to be around. So in 5 years' time, it'll probably be a different 3 frameworks that are the most popular frameworks that we have with AG Grid. So I want to make sure that that's kept as a core focus, that we keep up to date and keep moving the grid and we don't get stale. Right, I'm going to go through things we're implementing now, we're going to implement but haven't started, and things we might implement, but we're not too sure if we're going to do it or not yet. And I prepared this talk a month ago, and in the meantime, we were working on this, but it's been released. So the XLS export is something that we just released in the last version of AG Grid, so native support for XLSX. And also the Delta column updates we've just released as well. Before this, if you changed the columns, like if you added a column or removed a column, you lost all of the context of the column. So if you had a sort or a filter apply or a column order, if you added a column, all that was reset. Whereas now we allow you to add and remove columns without losing the context in the grid. So both of those came in the last release. Which then leads us to the next section. So again, I'm going to say what we're currently working on, what we plan to work on, but haven't started yet, and then the future. So under development, better IE performance. Who has to deploy to IE? Just last time I'm going to ask you to show their hands. Who deploys to IE? Okay. Do you think the performance in AG Grid is good in IE? That was a yes or no? Yeah, okay. Well, a lot of people think it doesn't, and I'll show you why. It's to do with, especially when you pin columns. So I'm going to go to my slower down browser again. And I'm going to go to aggrid.com, which is showing the latest release. And I'm going to pin this column to the right-hand side. And I'll pin a second column, maybe rating to the right-hand side. And then to give a slower experience, I'm going to render more data. Now you'll notice when I move the columns up and down that the pins section goes out of sync with the main section, okay? If you're on a slower PC, which is often in end users, that's quite noticeable. And what you end up with is the shift can last for maybe a second, which means that the data is not correct, where you've got the wrong data showing for the rest of the row. And for some users, that's a real big problem. And another thing, which is a real big problem, is when you move the scroll bar around, you can see the headers, they lag. They're kind of moving behind. And again, this is a fast laptop. On slower machines, that's irritating. It's just really, really irritating. So we do have some really great people. Oh my God, I sound like Donald Trump when I say great people. We've got some proper people working in AG Grid. And one of the guys working with us now came from, Sencha? Yeah, some people know Sencha. Okay, they were a really popular grid, but they have had better days. And he told us how we could redesign how the DOM is laid out. And we spent the last 2 or 3 weeks doing this. So here you can see I've got one column pinned to the right. Let me pin 2 columns so I'm comparing like for like. And one column pinned to the left. and as I scroll up and down, it's kept perfectly in sync. There's no offset at all. Now, if you're one of those people in IE that had that problem, this is just like brilliant. For the rest of you, you're bored. Okay, and then if I move the columns left and right, you'll see that they keep in sync as well. Okay, so that's something that you can look forward to in the next release. The next release is going to be Jan. We've decided not to release coming up to Christmas because that could ruin our Christmas holidays. So yeah, Jan's going to be the next release. Okay, so that's under development. Under development, better IE performance. The next one, which is under development, is implementing master detail in the server-side row model. So the server-side row model is what Rob just spoke about, and then the master detail is allowing you to click on a row and it'll create another grid inside with different columns, and it'll fetch the data independently. The type of grid that you show, sorry, I said that incorrectly. The row model that you use inside doesn't have to be the server-side row model. So you can have the server-side row model as the parent grid, and then the one inside can be whatever you want. It's not tied to be the same one. Would anybody use that? Now, a few people on support have been looking at it. We get requirements from a few different areas. We look at what the competition's doing, things that make sense to us, but we really look at what people are saying on Zendesk, which is the enterprise support system that we have. And this is one which has been requested quite a few times. Okay, scheduled. This stuff we really want to do. We think it's a good idea, and we're going to be working on this in Q1, Q2 in 2019. First one is cell tooltips. So at the moment, you can add tooltips to the cells, and it just uses the native browser tooltips. But what we want to do is allow you to provide components, which will then appear as tooltips. So they'll be rich tooltips, and you'll be able to style them and customize them, and you'll be able to provide them whatever framework you want, Angular, React, Vue, etc., etc. And I've been told as well at the moment, if you scroll, the tooltips don't scroll with the scroll, which is a bit bad. When we implement these tooltips, they will scroll. When I hear just a silent crowd, I'm kind of thinking, nobody wants this, nobody wants this. Hey, thank you. Searching. So when you press Control F on the laptop, or if you're a Mac, it's something else in F, you can do a search for the web page. But that won't work with AG Grid because it only searches the DOM, and if the rows aren't rendered inside the DOM, then you can't search for something which is outside of the viewport. So what we want to do is implement a search facility which will do exactly as you would expect it to do if all the rows were there. So in this example here, it's as if I did a search for English, and it'll go through all of the data and highlight all of the areas where English is present. That's been requested a few times, and we think it's pretty cool. Okay. And online training. The grid's got so many features, and we meet people like in situations like this, and they learn things which is in the documentation. And to me, that's like, but this is in the docs. How could you have not known this if you've been using AG Grid for so long? Everything is documented, but there's so many features, it's kind of difficult to learn everything in the grid. So that's why we want to put more emphasis on, before creating new features, well, let's tell everybody what the features that are already there. So we're going to put more emphasis on documentation and guides and tutorials, and we're hoping to start doing online videos as well next year. Okay, for consideration, no commitments. That says no commitment, that means I'm not necessarily doing it, okay? It's not a commitment. Right. Right, this is where we're going to get some interaction from you guys, the audience. If there's something here that you think is really good, kind of go, clap, clap, or yay, or yes, I'd love that, or something. And then if you don't want to do it, you can go boo. If something gets a lot of feedback, we might do it. If it doesn't, then I'll fire the person in AG Grid who said we should do it. Right, first one for consideration. PDF export. That was actually, we did this conference last month in New York, and that got zero response from people in the audience. To implement this is quite difficult. It's not easy because PDF doesn't work off HTML, it works off SVG. So what we would need to do is generate an SVG version of the PDF. So we're kind of the gain versus reward. Sorry, not gain versus reward, effort versus reward. Effort's quite large. Quick question?
Are you thinking of the printing like in the Google Apps, like in Google Sheets?
No, just an export. So the same way you can export to XLSX at the moment, have an ability to export as PDF.
Actually, that would be cool to do it like Google Sheets.
I haven't seen what Google Sheets does, so I'll need to look at that.
Have a look at the spreadsheets.
Okay. Cool. And then something I would compare it against is if somebody really wants a PDF, then they should just print and save the printed version as a PDF file if they were really, really, really stuck. So yeah, we're not really hot on this because you're not getting enough like warm feedback for it. Okay. Oops. What's that?
Sorry, will it fetch all the data? So not just in the viewport, but basically.
Well, we haven't actually planned to do it, so I can't really say. Well, we've got two plans. The Excel one, it depends on the row model that you're using. If you're using the client-side row model, it'll export everything that's inside the inside memory. If you're using one of the ones at lazy load, like viewport, server-side, or infinite, it'll only export what's currently in memory. So for the enterprise, the blocks which are currently loaded are the ones that'll get exported, but it won't do a fetch. You can't really do a full export because if you're using the server-side row model, then that suggests that your data is too large to bring across into the client. So for that type of an export, you'd need to implement it on the server side, and that's not AG Grid's responsibility. Okay? All right, the next one, charting. I kind of always stayed away from charting. The reason was when I started doing the grid, there was a gap in the market. Nobody was doing a proper enterprise-grade grid, and therefore I did it to fill that gap. With charting, there's a lot of charting libraries out there. There's a lot of really good charting libraries out there. What could we possibly bring to the market that's not already being done? So for you guys who kind of cheered, can you explain why is this a good idea? Yep. Integration with the grid. Yeah. That's one reason that I've come to appreciate. Second reason is people who buy stuff from vendors, they'd like to buy from less vendors. So if we're doing charts and they're using AG Grid, they'd rather use our charts rather than have to buy charts off somebody else. So it does make sense. But the integration one, that really kind of stuck with me when I realized what you could actually do. We could kind of give an Excel type experience. So as an application developer, all you need to do is, as you're doing today, install AG Grid, throw some data at it, and you get all these features for free. And all you need to do then is click on Enable Charting, and you get all this cool stuff for free. So what you could do is maybe select a range of data, go to chart, choose your chart type. The chart could then go to your column definitions, see what the metadata is for the different columns, whether it's a number, whether it's a string, etc., and then pop the chart out. We also have this tool panel here. Maybe we could put some cool interactive stuff here for deciding how the chart looks. So we think, yeah, charting can be really, really, really cool. And we plan to include this as part of AG Grid Enterprise. We don't plan to put it into a different library. So once you get AG Grid Enterprise, you'll get all the charting as well. And we also want to fix how we want to fix AG Grid so we can do tree shaking. So if you're worried about the library size, we'll have this so that you can shake it out and not actually need it. We've started making this serious. So you know Sencha, who some people did, they kind of have a pretty decent charting library. So the guy who was heading that charting is a guy called Vitaly, Russian guy, who's sitting right here, who now works for AG Grid. This week was his first week. So we're putting action and code has begun to be written. So you can expect to see some beta, no pressure, Vitality, or Vitality, Vitality, Jesus. No pressure, Vitality. But yeah, we're probably going to see some beta stuff coming out, I'd say, in March or April. That's your deadline, by the way. I just made up a deadline for you. But we're going to go through some beta versions so people will see it, and then that'll allow us to change the interface. So we'll, like what Angular did, people can start using it, but we could change how it actually looks before the end result. Okay.
If you do charting, would it be like possible to like widgets as well pop up?
Maybe. Brings me on to the next slide, which is components. We have components in AG Grid. Some of them are quite complex. One of them, that's one of my favorites, is the menus. So on the right-hand side here, we've got the context menu. And it works really well, and you can configure the context menu. You can give it icons. You can have menus and sub-menus and at n levels. Also, we have this rich select, which is for editing. That works really, really well as well. But you can't use these widgets outside of AG Grid because we haven't allowed you to. There's kind of a problem here that presents to you that your app then will look inconsistent. So if you've got menus in your app, they'll look different to the menus that we have. Also, because we have all this cool stuff developed, maybe we should just let you guys use it. So there's a mini project that we have in mind. Actually, it's not a mini project, it's a big project, to allow these things to be used outside of AG Grid. It means it'll need to be used with all of the different frameworks that we're having and just work seamlessly. And then we could also maybe add a few other components. Our competitors, they do something similar. They have like a library of components that you can use. We do not want to do that. I have no interest in creating a button or a drop-down or a fancy radio button. So there's loads of free libraries out there if you want to get something fancy for the simple components. What we're going to do is just provide the components which are complicated, where we think that our value as like complex component providers can give you something to work with. Does that seem like a good idea? Okay. Well, there's no no's. I think this would be a great idea, but it's a kind of balancing it against the other ideas that we could do. I think charting is going to be foremost, and then I think given endless developers, then I think this is something we will do at some point. Okay, the next bit. AG stack. So we have an IOC container, and we've got a component library. Why don't we let you guys use it instead of using React or Angular? And like as an individual thinking, do we really want to go down here? Would that actually be popular? Would people actually use it? Would people onboard it? Would people onboard it? Would people onboard it? Yes, they would. As a matter of fact, people have already onboarded it. If you think about it, this stack is already deployed in so many companies around the world, 250,000 downloads. It's actually inside AG Grid. So from a technical point of view, there's not much we'd have to do here to create the platform. All we'd need to do is document it, and then people could actually use it. And then, yeah, I think the onboarded bit is brilliant, because to get your software into a bank is a really, really hard process. This is already onboarded into the banks. Is it a good idea? It will be a change in direction for what we're doing. If we expose it and document it, then we need to commit to supporting it. The interfaces would need to be locked down, and we would find it more difficult as a company if we were supporting all of this as well. It would be a very bold thing to do. But the upside, if we actually created a framework which was designed for enterprises and not for the web. What I mean by that is you have Angular and you have React, which are really, really, really good frameworks. But they're designed for customer-facing portals, for online shops, hotel booking systems, booking your flights. They're also used for enterprise, but they're not specifically designed for creating applications in the enterprise. Whereas AG Stack would be focused on applications for the enterprise. So I can see how we'd have a niche here in providing this framework. And well, I think it would be pretty cool. If I was writing a new application from scratch, being an expert in AG Stack, I would use AG Stack over Angular or React. How does that sound? Yeah, it's something that we have in the back pocket. I don't think we'll do it in the next 6 months. But after we've boxed off charts and boxed off maybe the components, and we're all really eager, then this could be the natural step for us. We'll have to see. The next one, user expressions. I said I wouldn't do any more hands-up questions, but there's actually a hands-up question coming. Who uses value getters? Yeah, a few. OK, who doesn't know what a value getter is? Wow. When we were in New York, nobody knew what a value getter was. Like, there was no one that knew it, and that kind of scared me a bit, because it's one of the coolest features, I think, in AG Grid, where you use a value getter instead of the field to get the data out. Well, we have the concept of expressions inside AG Grid, because the value getter can be just a string. And we also have this concept of, I think it's called enable cell expressions, where you can actually put value getters directly into the cell, just like Excel. So if you start the value with an equal sign, it'll then allow you to put some JavaScript in to connect the values up together. Who knew you could do that? One person. Wow. It's in the docs. I can't remember what the property is called. It's not used that often. The problem with this is if you enable it, then it's a huge security concern, because your users can then put in JavaScript, and that's not good. So where this is used is you don't have the cell to be editable right now. So you'll maybe load these expressions from your server, and then you'll put them in, but the user can't edit, so then it's locked down. But what if we did allow the users to edit them? What would we need to do? Well, for us, it's not that much more work to lock this down, to say that the user's only allowed to use a certain amount of functions that we've pre-allowed, and to kind of give something that looks like Excel expressions, but it would be based on JavaScript. What this would then allow your users to do is put in their expressions. Where this would be useful is, for example, with quants, who are currently using spreadsheets that we know are bad. Or you could have a report, and then just the last column of that report is an expression field. And the users could just tap in their expressions and get more information out into the column on the right-hand side, and then your application could save those expressions down for the next time they come in to view the report. Okay, so for those of you who followed what I was saying, is that a good idea? Thank you. Cool, user expressions. I've wanted to do this right from the start, but it's just never really come to the forefront. Okay, is that the last one? It was the last one. So that's it. So that's where we're going with AG Grid. So the top ones you've already done. Under development, you'll get in January. Scheduled will be Q1, Q2 next year. And for consideration, we're going to start working on charting next. That's going to be the next big thing for AG Grid. And then after that, I don't know. We're not committed to where we are. We'll see what the feedback is and then take it from there.